Oh, good morning, everyone. Let's talk about mobile backends as a service, ready for production. Now, at least this was the original title of my talk, and then I started preparing it and got myself so bored with it that I was afraid that you might all fall asleep during this enterprisey presentation. So instead of bombarding you with all the software as a service jargon that I had prepared, I'm going to do 2.5 stories. They will still have to do with backends as a service, so don't worry. Now, the more appropriate title for this talk would be something more like this. I just want to work on my app. Don't bother me with this backend stuff. About 3 years ago, I had an idea, an app idea. So that's not unusual. Everyone has a lot of ideas how to improve their or other lives with an app. But many people don't have the tools to make the ideas come true. At that time, I used to be a product manager. I knew a lot about how to make a concept for a product, and I decided to act on my idea. So I climbed down from the lighthouse overlooking the sea of possible ideas and paths and got down to business. So just be warned, I'm going to stay with the maritime examples for the rest of my talk, so prepare to get wet. So what do you do to track down one path in the vast ocean of possibilities? I used the tools I knew as a product manager and started creating wireframes and flowcharts and click dummies. It was all great, and I was happily sailing on my path to my own app. But of course, it still wasn't an app, it was just a concrete concept. If I wanted to see if this concept could work, I needed to give it to people and let them play around with it. To create a real app, I needed to dive deeper in. So I jumped from my product manager ship into the water and started snorkeling. If you jump from the ship into the water, the tools you need to survive are different. So I learned Objective-C, learned to work with Xcode and Interface Builder, and in the end of a long process of learning, desperation, and hope, I had an app. It was working. Well, almost. You know, of course my idea wasn't trivial. It should be a community around learning. That meant I needed to have user accounts and be able to share data between users. I needed a backend for my app. So once again, I needed to dive deeper. My first reaction was, oh God, no, I just learned Objective-C. I don't want to dive deeper again. It's dark down there and evil sea creatures are lurking around. But unfortunately, to reach the goal I had set me, I really needed a backend. And again, I tried to gather up all my courage and prepared myself to dive deeper in. But this time, I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a next step of diving deeper. Because going even deeper meant using a submarine into the abyss of server and database hosting and administration. So no. I wasn't going to go there. I already seemed to have lost track of my app idea by diving down so deep. I wasn't going to learn how to navigate a submarine now. But I could relax, because by accident, I stumbled over CouchDB. Now, CouchDB is a NoSQL database. It has an HTTP REST API, and you can add some business logic through update functions and replication between databases. There were also 2 services that provided CouchDB hosting. And for the cherry on top of the cake, there was an iOS port called Couchbase Lite for storing objects first locally, and then, when there was an internet connection again, it would sync the data back to the server. So I therefore even had an offline mode. It was perfect. Now, I don't want to get deeper in the cool stuff you can do with CouchDB in this talk. If you want to know more, you can find me later. So let's just say CouchDB was a good fit, but I needed to bend CouchDB to my will a lot to make it work as my only backend. And I just wished that someone or something would take care of writing the code for creating user accounts and user databases, changing passwords, and whatever. It was possible, but it just took a lot of time away from me, where I couldn't work on the unique aspects of my app. Well, that wraps up the first part of my journey. In the end, I had a fully working app. I had learned tons of things, and I was moderately satisfied with the progress I've made. The app wasn't a success, though. Maybe because the idea and the concept weren't good enough. Maybe because it took me too much time. Maybe I used the wrong tools, or I couldn't operate them well enough. Maybe I sucked at marketing. Probably it was a combination of all these things. Now, before going further to the next journey, I would like to make a short break to show you this super academic slide of the maritime ecosystem of everything as a service. In this example, each level in the ocean stands for a different set of skills and tools you need in order to master that level. Fortunately for us, there are services that provide the expertise prepackaged for you, so you can stay on a higher level on your journey without getting lost in the abyss of the ocean. So at the very bottom is everything that has to do with virtual machines, servers, storage, load balancers, and networks. You usually can set up and administrate that all by yourself, but if you're like me, I'm pretty sure that you don't want to. If you don't want to spend time doing it yourself, you either hire an admin or rely on infrastructure as a service. There are services like Amazon S3 and EC2, and also Rackspace. These are located in this area. Infrastructure as a service allows you to operate in the middle deep sea without having to dive all the way to the ground. On the next higher level in the middle deep sea is everything that has to do with application development and deployment, execution runtime, databases, web servers, and so on. Services that provide you development environments for PHP, Ruby, Java, Node.js, and databases like CouchDB, MongoDB, you name it. They're all located here and are called platform as a service. Examples would be Heroku, Engine Yard, Google App Engine. Now, both infrastructure as a service and platform as a service are used a lot in production today. And although there will always be some people who claim that everything is better when exactly customized to your needs, there are not many app developers out there who would prefer to do that on their own. What these services offer you in most cases is sufficient and lets you dive around in the shallow water without too much pain. Now, let's talk about this shallow water diving. Even on that level, where your app backend is located, there are things that are always very similar in most apps. This is the repetitive backend stuff. It includes creating user accounts, user authentication, user administration, storing and retrieving data, and sharing data between users. Now, of course, you can write this yourself. When you're not too familiar with the underlying deeper level, you might think, how hard can it be? I write that in a few lines of code. I thought so too. But if you're not a diver, you don't know all the creatures you have to fight and all the problems that can occur during your journey to stay safe. Take storing passwords, for example. How many people here know how to safely store a password on the server? Quite a few. Are you sure? Well, if you know how to do that, you know that you can't do that in just a few lines of code. A lot of even big services leaked passwords in the last years because the passwords were not salted and encrypted properly. So you should know what you're doing there, especially when it comes to security issues. And even if you know what you're doing, it will take a lot of time to write and test the code properly, time that is then missing in the app development. So for that reason, a lot of backend as a services like Parse and Kinvey, Firebase, Bassbox, Hoodie got into existence. The question is, are we there yet? Can you use these services in production without sacrificing too much of the flexibility you have when you write your own backend? Now, I will come back to that question later on. But before that, let's get started onto the second part of the journey. Last year, I was working in the mobile team at Project A Ventures, a startup incubator here in Berlin. Our goal at the time was to start a process of rapid prototyping of app ideas. To begin with, we started out with 2 app ideas we wanted to test and bring to the market very quickly. And given the setup of our team at that time, we decided to develop one app iOS first and the other one Android first. So yeah, don't ask, wouldn't prototype with Android again. Anyway, of course, we needed backends for both apps. We had backend developers for PHP, Java, Node.js in-house, but they were mostly booked for other projects. We could have booked a developer for a few days, but then we would have to have a clear specification of what we needed the backend to do, which we hadn't, because knowing exactly what you're going to need isn't really part of rapid prototyping. We needed a backend that we could adapt quickly in many iterations to our changing needs. That's when we decided to use a backend as a service. As we were all busy with app development and short of time, we didn't make a big assessment of what backend as a service providers are out there and which would be the one that would best fit our needs. We just picked Parse, because it looked very easy to set up, was the most popular. We didn't hear any bad things about it so far. And the backend functions could be written in JavaScript, a language we didn't know too well, but thought we could all deal with. So it was settled. The beginning was a bliss. The setup was a piece of cake. Just a few clicks on the website, install the SDK, and you're ready to go. We were convinced we made a great decision. We focused working on our apps, and Parse handled the rest. There was a bit of business logic we needed in the backend, no problem, we just wrote a few Cloud Code functions. Now, Cloud Code is how Parse calls its ability to extend the given functionality through JavaScript functions. So all was well, until it wasn't. Our first problems began after a few weeks and lasted and grew a lot when we went live with the first app. But before we're looking into our Parse problems, let's stay with the love a little bit longer and see what are the top reasons for choosing a backend as a service instead of writing the backend yourself or let someone else write it. So number 4 would be quality. A backend as a service provides you with well-tested, secure code written by an expert. At least it should be that way. And at least in most cases, the quality of the code is probably much better than something an app developer hacks together in a few hours. No offense. Number 3, money. Yes, that's always an issue. If you don't have the knowledge to write your own backend, you can hire a backend developer, which of course costs money. Most backends as a service providers do cost money at some time, but at least in the development phase of your app, it's mostly free. Number 2, time. Creating a customized backend for your app takes time. Always more time than you think. In many cases, that's time where you are reinventing the wheel because most of that code has been written before. And number 1, focus. For me, the most important thing. I'm an app developer, and I'm good at it. I also know that I need to focus on the important things to make a good app. If I have to worry all the time about API access tokens, secure password storing, or setting up a service to send push notifications, I can focus on the app itself. I am distracted by problems almost all apps have. So Backends as a service lets me focus on the things that make my app special. Now, back to our Parse experience and the time our love went cold. For that, I need to explain Parse a little bit more. Now, the parse backend is based upon MongoDB and Node.js. You might think about these technologies what you want. I know that some people are not exactly fans, but they are still powerful tools in the hands of skilled developers. Now, parse doesn't let you handle these powerful tools by yourself. It doesn't even make it transparent what the underlying technologies are. Parse puts MongoDB and Node.js in a box and provides you with a slightly different and dumbed-down interface. An interface which is easy to learn and use until something goes wrong. So for one of the apps we developed, we needed to connect to Amazon's simple notification service to get notified when a video was processed. If you ever had to connect to Amazon Web Service, you probably know that authentication is a total pain. Thank God there are SDKs for all the major platforms that lets you easily connect to Amazon, even one for Node.js. Parse is based on Node.js, so we should be able to use it, right? Well, the documentation simply tells you that some Node.js modules might work with parse, some might not. Unfortunately for us, the Amazon Node.js module was one of the many ones that didn't work with parse. So by using parse and saving a lot of time in the beginning of the development, we were now losing a lot of time by having to reinvent the wheel and writing code from scratch that was already out there, working and tested, but we couldn't use it. Because this was all too much for our basic JavaScript skills, we got help. A Node.js developer for the rescue. Now, if you want to make your Node.js developer cry, just ask them for help with parse. They're so gonna love it. So here's how our first interactions with him were like. Here it is. Okay, let's get to work. How do I set this up locally? Where is the local development environment? There isn't one. We always need to deploy our changes directly to the server. What? And okay, when I deploy to the server, where are the logs? Where can I see what I'm logging and see the errors? Oh, yes, on the website you can see some logs. It is unfortunately limited to about the last 50 lines. Also, we're not sure if it does display the correct Node.js errors. It might just eat some of them up and display a general error. What? Now, we had several other issues with parse. If you want to know more about them, find me later, and I'd be happy to rant more. To be fair, some of the issues we had were addressed by later and newer releases of parse. But from my point of view, the main problem here is that parse is a silo. You can't swim around in your fishbowl when your requirements don't exceed what parse offers you. But when things go wrong, or when you start outgrowing your fishbowl, the way to the rest of the ocean is blocked, or at least very hard to reach. And it's not so easy to just switch to another backend or backend as a service, because your classes are subclasses of parse classes. The data export function is total pain. We are definitely not talking about a few days for a switch here. So that was the second part of the journey. Let's move on and have a look at some of the other backend as a service providers. Sorry, it's parse again. Well, we just talked a lot about parse, so what else do you need to know? It's basically the Swiss Army knife of backends for indie developers. It provides you with a lot of things that exceed the basic backend needs. It has push notifications, you can host websites, you have Facebook and Twitter login and sign up, you have basic analytics, and there are SDKs for iOS, Android, .NET, JavaScript, and Unity. Parse is owned by Facebook. Make of that whatever you want. And your backend is necessarily hosted by parse, no way out. Now, there is Kinvey, also a backend as a service. It has an even bigger tool set and focuses on businesses rather than indie developers. And one big difference to parse is the dedicated Kinvey option. Dedicated Kinvey means you don't need to store your data on servers that Kinvey provides. You can let Kinvey operate and deploy the backend on your dedicated servers or your private cloud. I'm pretty sure it's very expensive, but they don't tell the price on their website. Looking into Kinvey might be a good idea if you have special requirements of where your data can be legally stored or have special concerns for security. Now, Firebase is a bit different from the others. It has a special niche in the real-time app sector. When you're building a chat app, for example, you might want to look into Firebase. Now, Bassbox, I'm not sure if it's pronounced that way, is a backend solution which doesn't put you in a silo. It's fully open source, and you can deploy it anywhere you want. The backend is based on Java. Not sure what kind of database they're using. But so if Java is one of your preferred tech stacks, you might want to look closer into Bassbox. From what I can tell, it's still in an earlier development stage, but it's definitely one to look out for. Now, Hoodie. Let me tell you first that I'm extremely biased here because I wrote the iOS SDK for Hoodie. But nonetheless, everything I say about it is true. And yes, I can totally see the irony that I said in the beginning, that I just wanted to work on my app and not even care about the backend, and now I'm working on a backend as a service. Well, here's how that came along. You remember my first attempt as a backend was CouchDB? A good choice for storing and syncing data, but it was a bit harder to add business logic. People recommended me then that I should use Node.js for the business logic and let CouchDB just handle the data storage and syncing. But how to set that up exceeded my knowledge at that time. And okay, not only at that time, I still wouldn't know how to do that properly right now. I also didn't have time and money anymore, so I stopped the development there. While I was working on other things, including the battles with Parse, there were some web developers who had basically the same problems I had, and they started Hood for web apps based on Dreamcode. Now, Dreamcode means they first created the API of their dreams, a single line of code for creating a user account, a single line of code for storing an object, and so on. And they also found people who could make the Dreamcode come true. They created Hoodie with all the cool stuff. It's open source. You can deploy it anywhere you want. It's offline first, meaning your data is stored locally first and synced on demand to the server. And it won't make your Node.js developer cry if you need help, because it doesn't cover what it is based on. After I heard about Hoodie, I was totally excited. This was exactly what I needed and wanted all the time. But it was for web apps only. I was like, why is no one porting this to iOS? Hello? Anyone? Someone should do that right now. All right, I'm an iOS developer myself. If I wanted it, why am I not doing it for myself? So that's what I did, or at least started. Now, the iOS port of Hoodie is still in an early stage, but doesn't have to stay there, especially if you might want to contribute. You're hereby happily invited. If you want to know more about Hoodie or want to work on a hack with Hoodie on Friday, talk to me later. I'll be around all 3 days. Now, the services I just talked about are, of course, not the complete list of backends as a service. There are many more fish in the sea. So these are just examples of some others I found. There are some that I didn't look further into, because they're more like a platform as a service with just some business logic added to it. I think Microsoft Azure would be an example for that. Others are focusing on a special category of apps like games. These Flux, Applicasa, and OpenKit are focusing on game development. So you definitely have a lot of choices when it comes to backends as a service. But the key question remains, are we there yet? As with all things, there is not a simple answer to that. We are definitely on our way. If you're using a backend as a service to quickly prototype an idea, I would say yes, at least given that you don't have too fancy requirements. If you want to use it in production, it depends. For some apps, it might be good enough already. For many others, if you choose a service that puts you into a silo, it won't be enough. The question for you would then be, do you use one of the services that lets you outgrow the given functionality? You would then only be limited by the tech stack the backend chooses for you. Or are the benefits of the supported functionality not enough to sacrifice free tech stack choice? Now, that's only a question you can answer. If you ask me, no, we're not there yet, but what we have makes my life as an app developer definitely more easy already, and I can see that the future is even brighter. Now, that would be all. Thank you for listening.